All right, guys. So we previously told you that there is a journalist, an accomplished journalist named Yoichi Clark Shimatsu, formerly the editor of the Japan Times, who made some stunning claims about Kamala Harris and her late mother, Shamla Goplin. As a graduate of Berkeley University, Clark, as he prefers to be called, ran in the same circles as them. And he claims that Kamala's mother was a part of the CIA's MK Ultra program, a psychopathic, sadistic program that ran throughout the 60s, probably is still running today, in which Americans and even government agents alike were drugged and sometimes murdered with the aim of brainwashing the masses. Clark also claims, rather stunningly, that Kamala Harris was previously married to a wealthy Canadian, a marriage which her connections to the deep state have gone through great pains to delete from public record. So is he telling the truth? Well, I'll let you decide, because today we welcome him onto the show. Welcome back to Candace. Okay, Yoichi Clark, it is an honor to have you join the show today. I'm just going to let guests know that you are joining by audio because you are in a very remote area, but welcome to the Candace Show.
Well, thank you very much. Very glad. I'm a rather minor character in this border drama right now, and I'm afraid communications where I am are really, they've been tampered with because of the border situation. It's terrible down here. So.
Well, you might be a minor character down there, but you're definitely a major character on my podcast right now. We have just been crawling through Kamala's background and her history. I'm sure you're very aware of that. And we did come across your piece, which was quite fascinating for a lot of reasons. You had mentioned a previous marriage that Kamala had. You had mentioned the MK Ultra program. I would like to just start with Kamala's mother and speak about the MK Ultra program, because it's actually a program that I have been speaking about at length on the podcast this year, that I've been asking Americans and the world to really familiarize themselves with. So can you just let us know how it is that you are familiar with Shamla Goplin, Kamala's mother's work, and what it is that you know about her, please?
Well, I was sort of a contemporary of theirs in the Berkeley area. I worked at a news service in San Francisco, Pacific News Service, and so very familiar with the characters there, where she lived, of the foreign student population at Berkeley. And I did attend the journalism school, the Graduate School of Journalism at Berkeley. So this is all familiar ground for me. Kamala was a prosecutor later when she was behind the incarceration of like hundreds and probably thousands of young Black juvenile delinquents. Yeah, there was young kids, but you have to understand the situation then. The older guys who were running the drug trade for the cartel at the schools, they would forcibly recruit these young guys, and she was just slamming them into prison. They were just horrible, and that's one reason why a lot of Black men refused to vote for her now. She, just that one-sided treatment while she let all the major cartel figures walk, or just warned them, get out of here, because the cops are trying to arrest you. So she was in the thick of it. She was the girlfriend of Willie Brown, who was a lawyer. He had a law office for the cartel. Later, he became mayor and a state senator. But she was just in the dirty business. And one of my best friends and proteges, Jeff Adachi, died mysteriously.
Yes, let's actually speak about that. So you have a young friend and your protege named Jeff Adachi, and the first time that I had come across his name was in your piece, and I did do a little bit of research, and it is a fact that he did die rather mysteriously, and I think it would be fair to say that he was a contender of Willie Brown's office. Willie Brown was running somebody against him, definitely made enemies, I would say, of the Democrat elite class in San Francisco. So could you just inform my readers a little bit more about Jeff Adachi?
The thing is, he was at Bolt Hall as a contemporary of Kamala's. He was a straight A student, and she was, they were going to kick her out because her grades were so bad, and they didn't think she'd make it in the law. She's never been a good speaker. And he was appointed to be her tutor and got her through Bolt to get her degree. Later on, she was hired to be public prosecutor. And strangely enough, he was a public defender. And he set up this huge program in which a lot of people really, like a lot of parents in the Western Addition and in the Fillmore, those are Black districts, were really enthusiastic because he was getting the kids out of prison. These were really hardcore prisons, and getting them into special ed programs, educational programs, work study programs, and straightening them out. And hundreds of kids, so the community was overjoyed. And then one day he was found dead in his apartment. And they made all kinds of things that, oh, he had this affair with this Russian woman as if she had killed him. But no, she was just a visitor in town. He had gone over to visit her and chat with her. And then the autopsy was also the first one said, oh, he was died of all these drugs. The second autopsy showed him to be clean. So this was just a major, I hate to use the word conspiracy, but that was a conspiracy about his murder, to eliminate the guy who knew too much about Kamala, had opposed her treatment of young people, and they offed him, basically.
Well, you're on the right program to talk about conspiracies. I'll tell you that for free. One of the things that I've noted is that it does seem that part of this, if you want to call it a cabal, call it a mafia, one thing that they understand is to make sure that they control the medical examiner's office. And I don't think that there's any person in the entire world who would doubt that now, especially following COVID, that medical examiner offices are polluted with politics. And yes, if you're listening to this, you should look into the Jeff Adachi story. There's no question. You have a young person who has his entire life ahead of him. He dies rather suspiciously, and then the media starts throwing out all of these theories, which is what they tend to do. They create a bunch of theories so that it confuses the masses, and they look everywhere but where they should be looking. Now, I did not realize that he had helped Kamala in the past. I did not realize that they had a relationship.
But you would not have gone into law without his guidance and really attention. And it took a lot of time away from him. He was not a rich person. His father was an automobile mechanic. He worked his way through school. I mean, and as a straight A student, that's just amazing. Really nice kid. He helped me out a lot with the Southeast Asian refugees following the Vietnam War when they were banned from coming to the U.S. And I was dealing with a flood of them and needed some legal help because we were lobbying Congress. And Jeff just stepped right forward, took care of it, and really great kid. He didn't drink, didn't smoke. He really clean kid. We would go to bars in Japantown. Good singer at karaoke, but he didn't drink a drop. He was just a totally nice kid, all American.
And just what was the year, by the way, in which he passed? Or around about?
I was in, I think he died in the early 90s. I was by then in Japan. I had been hired after the San Francisco earthquake, major paper in Japan. So I took off, and I didn't hear about his death from my friends, because they were so tied up with it. And it was only much later that I heard that Jeff. I said, "What happened to Jeff?" And he says, "Oh, didn't you hear? He died, and then
what is it?
It was a stunning shock to me, and there was nothing I could do it at the beginning, so it took me a long time to catch up with Kamala on this one.
Okay, so what is it about Kamala that Jeff Adachi knew that you believe would have created some conflict for her?
The cartel connection. Yeah. It wasn't mafia. It wasn't conspiracy. It was a cartel. She was an agent of the cartel, and I know other stories too about members of that. When San Francisco was very close circles, not a large city.
Right. We heard the same thing from Judge.
No one knew everything else, and no one really wanted to talk except me. I worked at the Pacific News Service, and I break these stories, but even they were scared to take on the cartel.
Very interesting. And, I did recently speak to Judge Joe Brown, and he kind of intimated the same, that she was definitely involved in a lot of dirty politicking, and especially Willie Brown as well. And you mentioned Willie Brown in your piece and his connection, which you allegedly had to the cartel. Could you expand on that, please?
Yeah, well, he was from West Texas. He was there's a lot in California, a lot of immigrants from West Texas. When the cattle industry the ranching industry wasn't doing well, they migrated west. He got a law degree, I believe in San Francisco. And His contact with the cartel was very, very early on. They probably helped him get his law degree. I remember one time he knew me. We were going to a public event. It was sort of like a carnival that there was going to be some speeches at. And I was walking toward that with my girlfriend, and then he comes walking right behind me, grabs me by the left arm, and squeezes my arm as hard as he can. But you have to understand. I used to be a steel worker, a welder. I worked all kinds of jobs earlier in my life, so I was tough as nails. And once he felt my muscles flexing, he opened his hand up and just walked past me, fast as hell, sort of in humiliation. That he couldn't intimidate me. That's the kind of guy he was.
Wow, unbelievable! You hear these stories.
He was a very threatening fellow, and he knows me. When I talked about the another girlfriend of him is London Breen. She's the mayor of San Francisco, and the first thing she does for homeless people as a welcome wagon is give them a pack of syringes and a bottle of heroin to inject.
Wow.
This is not a joke. This is what they're doing there.
And so working on behalf of the cartel, and we heard from Judge Joe Brown last week also that while she was in power in San Francisco, that she worked to help George Soros essentially commit legal theft by protecting one of his companies. And so we're hearing over and over again that essentially she was given power to make sure that the elites are allowed to continue these various illegal trades that they're participating in. And you seem to confirm that. I do want to...
San Francisco was run by basically the Jewish mafia. Dianne Feinstein, she was born a Catholic and went to Catholic girls' school. But she married a Jewish guy and then just flipped over. And then... and I knew, and the Jews were behind the drug industry there. I remember visiting the Harlem one because a friend told me, "Oh, we got to go over there and visit this guy." And we went there, and sure enough, he was the biggest dope dealer distributor in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. He ran a garage, the big public garage in the middle of the city, where was a lot money laundering. He was there right there, shameless about it, counting the cash at his little desk while his wife jumped on me and started rubbing her boobs on my face.
Who was this?
I forget his name. He was the major money launderer for the cartel, and the laundry was this huge public garage that everyone in San Francisco that parked there, because it's a very bad city, had to use. There's this like 6-story garage. And then he lived on Goat Hill there in a big mansion. And I was just invited there by a friend, and, we were smoking some weed. And he was saying, this is the greatest era in American history because of heroes like, what's his name, the head of Microsoft? Mm-hmm. The head of Microsoft?
Bill Gates.
Bill Gates, he's a giant of American industry. And I said, this guy's out of his mind. He's smoking too much. He's smoking too much of the product that he's been selling. So,
wow,
he was very core to the whole Jewish lawyers, but more important, the real estate industry. Because that's why they had all the young boys arrested. They clear out the Western Addition because they want to put up nice, cute little apartments and cottages for the gays coming in from all over the country. Because they figure, because most of them come from rich families, they live like 5 to a house to a building, share quarters, and they're going to die of AIDS, within the next 6 years. So the house will be up for real estate again.
Wow.
It's really cynical. This is like a Dracula movie. It's something out of this world. And this was America's most liberal city.
All right, guys, the media has dubbed this the abortion election. We have to stand up to this evil. When you join forces with Preborn, the largest pro-life organization in the nation, you are protecting the greatest victims in our society, babies in their mothers' wombs. Preborn's network of clinics are positioned in the highest abortion areas in the nation, and they have rescued over 300,000 babies. When a woman considering abortion searches to end her baby's life, Preborn is there. Preborn gives these women in need a free ultrasound. The power of hearing a heartbeat on an ultrasound combined with God's love doubles a baby's chance at life. One ultrasound costs just $28, and up to 5 ultrasounds are $140. Any gift will help their cause, and all gifts are tax deductible. To donate securely, just dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. Again, that's pound 250 baby. Or you can go to preborn.com/Candace. That's preborn.com/Candace. Yeah, and it's like I said, it's stunning because we had Judge Joe Brown on here, and he's confirming all of the same things. He was speaking about Martin Luther King's assassination. He was speaking about how the government had a hand in that, and it is. I think for a lot of people who, over 1 million people, I think 1.5 million people have watched that episode, and they said, I feel like I'm learning American history for the first time, because you learn in your textbooks that everything was just above board, and America's just been this great country. And, it's very stunning to hear from people who grew up in these various cities about mafia-related crimes, talking about drugs, talking about the corruption of Kamala Harris and how she was in the weeds on this, and quite terrifying, knowing that she is trying to be elected as the president of the United States. I do want to shift gears and talk about her mother, because I was quite stunned by your assertion that she was involved in the MK Ultra program, and yet that to me seemed to be the only thing that made sense, because she seemed to be sort of infiltrating the civil rights movement. And I'm going, what is this alleged brilliant scientist doing, constantly involving herself in civil rights protests and making friends with these individuals? And because I'm well read on the MK Ultra program, I recognize the connection there. Can you speak about what she did, or what you are alleging she did? Yeah.
Well, the first thing with the first place, you got to understand that the Pollen clan, they were like clerks, judges, spies for the British when India was a British colony. And Miss Kamala was born when it was still a British colony. So the rest of the country was up in arms fighting against the British, but they were very, very loyal to the British intelligence service and police service in India. So this is how they all got ahead, by catering to the British. And that enabled Shyamala Gopalan, when she was, after she got her degree in Madras, India, to enter UC Berkeley, which is not the cheapest school in the universe, nor is California a really inexpensive place to go. It's one of the most expensive places. I know. I went to school there. It's very expensive there. She worked at the monkey lab there. She was into it's a real strange combination of psychology and simian studies and zoology. Okay, and she was an expert, training monkeys and all that. And Madras is an area, her hometown, where there's a lot of monkeys running around the Hindu temples and all that. And so she's very familiar and very good with them. And she developed the theory that and this was a time of Jane Goodall. There's a huge boom of women who work with apes. Okay, there were ape programs set up all across the United States and England and Europe, out of excitement of the Goodall story, news stories. And Goodall were treating apes, the monkey children, as sort of like human children, and getting some very, very good responses of taming them. Mm-hmm. So she was of that school. Now, what happened while she was at UC Berkeley, after she got her degree, she moved out of Berkeley and took her 2 kids and divorced her husband, this guy Harris, Donald Harris, who was, at the time he was in biology, then he went into law, divorced him and moved to San Francisco and did nothing for 2 years. She waited 2 years while her application was in to a hospital in Montreal. So this was the Jewish hospital in Montreal, okay, that she applied to.
Yes, that's where she eventually did work. Yeah, she was eventually employed there.
Process, because they had to check all your background, everything, every little detail about her. And this is because the very famous psychiatrist who really got the MK Ultra program going, Ewan Cameron. He was a Scottish guy, a pedophile, and he was a torturer. He used all sorts of drugs on victims of that program. He passed away, and there was like about 7 to 8 year hiatus where his program was shut down because there was no one in charge, and they had to move the program because Congress. There was a secret, not so secret. There was an investigation in Congress about MK Ultra. So the heat was on, on the Canadians. The Ewan Cameron's lab was in Montreal. Okay, so he was on the Canadians that fast out, so they shut that lab down. There's an infamous Allen lab, and then they wanted to set up another center, also connected to the University of McGill University there in Montreal. They had to have that certification. And in the meanwhile, they were trying to find the new director to take over from them, and she finally got the call. They brought her over. They set her up at another one at the Jewish Hospital Annex, and she took charge of not only the monkey lab, she took charge of the patient care ward. Oh, wow. It was a small patient care ward because that hospital, Jewish Memorial, had a psychiatric clinic also. So she worked as a psychiatrist there in a very small division, which became the Center for the Revived MK Ultra program.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask a question here. So I did not realize that the person who started the program was a psychologist named Cameron. I was under the impression that the person... Ewan Cameron. Yeah, I was under the impression that it was Dr. Sidney Gottlieb who...
No.
Okay.
Sidney Gottlieb was a gopher. He was applied. He wasn't into research.
Okay.
He just applied everything Cameron had developed.
Okay.
Use of drugs, hypnotism, light deprivation, all of those nasty techniques to destroy a human willpower.
Wow.
Capture their brain. Gottlieb is a famous one, and everyone thinks MK Ultra was basically American technique. No, it came out of London. It came out of the Tavistock Institute of Sigmund Freud.
Yes.
World War II.
I am just so shocked that you are bringing this up because I got into a lot of trouble with the media for discussing Sigmund Freud at length, and I've been doing it on this podcast. It's super important for people to learn the truth about him, that he was a person who created a method of psychology essentially to gaslight people who were in fact being molested by their own parents, and that's why he was obsessed with children and sex. And it's shocking that we learned that he's a hero in psychology. And it's just very important for people to learn the truth about him because psychology is then, his family is then what bred propaganda. That would be the Bernays family and Edward Bernays. And you are correct. This all fits right into the MK Ultra program, which was designed to see how you could break down someone's will, how you could hypnotize them. We spoke at length on this show about how the Charles Manson murders, that was actually the CIA and everything that the public thinks they know about that. Same areas you're talking about, San Francisco, California. These are federal agents that were obsessed with learning how to hypnotize the public, how to destroy people's will. And a big part of that was molestation. And Sigmund Freud had, in fact, written pieces about how, molesting someone when they are a child, sodomizing, they were interested in exploring how they could create psychopaths. That's also another element of these programs and psychology. And I think it's hard for people to come to terms with how evil that is. And you're now saying that Shamala got the call and she then took a part in this program of testing patients.
Military intelligence created this.
Wow.
Brainwashing techniques they developed obviously massively during World War II because they tried to use that against the enemy, German allies, and so on, and the German enemy, and also against reluctant allies. They tried to use mind control techniques. But after the war, I think it was in the late 1940s, or 1940s. Between 1946 and 1948, the British military created the Tavistock Institute, which is on Tavistock Square in London. Sigmund Freud himself flew over from Switzerland to London to cut the opening ribbon. And then he assigned one of his sons to be the director of the place. He was right behind. He was the main psychiatrist in the family.
Yes, I'm familiar with Tavistock. There is also some indication that even the Beatles and music has come out of Tavistock University and how it could transform. Yeah, modifying human behavior.
That their craziest album.
Yep.
It's all about mind control.
Right. That's exactly right.
And so then what happened, as the this came under some parliamentary review. There's some complaints, so they decided to move the core of the program to Montreal, former a British colony, close to the United States, for contact, and sort of out of the way. Who would ever suspect that this dark devious program is going on in beautiful, wonderful forested Canada, right?
Wow.
In the French part of Canada too. Who would ever suspect that? And they could use the French as guinea pigs, right?
Yeah.
Now, when Kamala came in, there was concern about the British colonies, and so Shamala was more adapting this to the colonial subjects, not just the Caucasian people. And so they sent over a British disinfo agent, Hardy L. Baines. He was a character. I've actually been to one of his speech. The case, he was very intelligent, perfect English, but obviously there was something touched about his brain. And then he created the Communist Party Marxist-Leninist, okay, of Canada. Okay, it's the only communist party in Canada. And really evil character, okay? And the patients that Shamala was producing for him, very convenient, both Indians. He was a Sikh, but very independent of the Sikh movement. He was not part of the Sikh liberation movement. Him and Shamala were we call conspirators, I guess you call them. She would give him her patients, the young ones, especially they were focusing on younger people. They thought older people were not great subjects for this program. You use young guys who've been out of orphanages, out of prisons, and so on, juvenile detention. He put them with Hardio, and he did this thing called the living statues. Okay. I saw one I think it was a July 4th weekend. I was off. I had a lot of jobs in New York, but July 4th, I was my rare 4-day holiday. I took off with a bunch of friends and one Canadian guy who wanted to go home. We drove up there all night. And in the morning, as we approached Montreal, we saw the human statues, on the road. So we slowed down and stopped, got out. My friends were pretty rowdy and been drinking beer all night. Walked up to these guys. They're guys and women, girls, guys and girls. They were all in these revolutionary poses, posing like Russian revolutionaries, some with their fists up, other holding up a stick like it's a gun and all that. Right on a public road, okay, a major highway. Not a major highway, but a highway. We got out. My friends walk up to them and start to boo, try to get them to flutter, to wince. They wouldn't move at all. They're so upset. And one guy wanted to poke one in the eye. I said, better not do that, man. If you could be sued if you're, gouge your guy's eye. And then we all got spooked at once. They said, this is really, really, really weird. We got to get out of here as fast as we can. So we jumped back in car and went to Montreal for basically a weekend bash, what turned out to be a total bust. And so I got a glimpse of the Living Statues program. This was later applied to the Vietnam War. Okay, soon thereafter, the CIA recruited. They just put together a group of 200 special combatants to helicopter into the Ho Chi Minh Trail into Cambodia and Laos, because they were it's illegal to fight war then. Each guy as a loner would be dropped off a helicopter. He could run like up to 410, so endlessly. These are really mind control people. They would hide behind a tree trunk like up to 2 or 3 days to await the person the officer they're supposed to shoot, to kill, without going to the toilet, without batting their eyelashes, and in that same frozen pose. And then with some sort of timer they had, I have no idea, the timer would put them awake, warning them that the guy's coming down the road. They take a shot at him, kill him, and then run like hell. Now, out of that program of 200, there were only 12 survivors to 30 dozen, we call them. They got back to the United States. The Army flew them back. They were all at the CIA headquarters together, and CIA said, "We don't know what the hell you're talking about. You know, we don't know who you are. You know, you're lying," and kicked them out. And they became sort of a motorcycle gang in North Dakota and Western Colorado. And I met one of them, you know, so I knew the backstory of it. He was a Canadian Indian.
Wow. This is
there at Shyamala's facility when he was a kid, when he was young, a teenager.
Do you think you know who will win the presidential election or how many seats Democrats or Republicans will win in the House or Senate? Well, there's a legal financial exchange that lets you trade or bet on the outcome of these elections, and it's called Kalshi. Kalshi went to court against the Biden administration and won legal approval for election betting for the first time in over 100 years. They have markets on who will win the presidential election, who will control the House and Senate, who will win swing states, and more. Kalshi is already being used by hundreds of thousands of people and has facilitated over $1 billion worth of trades. What's cool about the platform is that you can trade on your opinions to make money or hedge your political risks. You can also check the market odds to see who is more likely to win at any given time. Right now, the odds are near 58-42. Not surprisingly, Trump is up big. The election markets are now live to trade. They are the first regulated place where you can do this. Right now, when you sign up at kalshi.com/Candace, the first 500 traders who deposit $100 will get a free $20 credit. That's kalshi.com/Candace. So I'll tell you what spooks me about what you're saying. First and foremost, the more that I have dug into her genealogy, there are a couple of aspects there that are fitting a little too perfectly with what you're telling me, realizing that her family was involved in the slave trade, that they were involved in Freemasonry, that for whatever reason, she's trying to make everyone believe she's every ethnicity but what she is, which we have been able to determine from Kamala's family, who have been very forthcoming and don't support what she's doing. Some people in her family have told us, look, we're Syrian Jews. I don't know why she's hiding this fact. And then some of her family members who are Jewish in Canada said the exact same thing. Like, we all feel like she's trying to hide the Jewish aspect, which is quite strange. The other thing that alarms me about what you're saying, though, is for Kamala to engage in this and to engage in what can only be described as program was human torture, to see if you could basically set a human being to blank, set a human being to zero, and fill them with whatever you wanted to do, turn them into robots. And there is an aspect of Kamala that feels as though she herself has been brainwashed. And I vividly recall her relative who I spoke to saying that far from the depictions of her relationship with her mother that she gives to the public today, her mother was militant, is what he said. Her mother was absolutely militant with her children, and she now makes it seem as though she had this flowery childhood. So you have this woman who, for work, is engaging in this psychiatric torture of citizens from around the world, and then you hear from her family member that she was militant with her children. And then I watch Kamala's behavior today, and it seems like she is a blank slate in which she allows every personality to fill. Like, she can be Jamaican yesterday, she can be Hispanic tomorrow, she can act like a black preacher as she's just done. And that terrifies me in a sense. It's almost as though Kamala herself has been brainwashed. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. You got to understand, her mother had to take care of these patients. They're her treasure. That's her ride, that's her income. She was able to buy a house with all that, and a pretty damn good house in Montreal. But her problem is she couldn't take care of her daughters. She's so much with the patients. So she had to regimen them. And she did with the techniques that she knew, and they were basically MK Ultra light. Let's say MK Ultra light rather than the whole treatment. Okay.
Yeah.
And that accounts for her weird speech patterns, or her sort of bizarre eye movements and body movements, or jerky stuff. That's just straight like these MK Ultra guys that you will meet. Like the one super soldier I met. He's perfectly normal over beer, and suddenly you go into his crazy jerky fits where it could be dangerous. He could kill you, So, that's basically the same as Kamala. Again, she had a lighter version of it. She got the whole hog. They didn't send her to Syria, to kill a bunch of jihadists or anything. But she has definitely been touched by that. And her sister also, she was another one. Maya, she was one of the three main campaign advisors to Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign.
Right.
So they were placed there sort of as controllers. And look at Hillary, what happened to her? From a sort of a goofy person into a robotic person.
Right.
Same thing. The program continued, and her sister was the minder. She had been through the program, and somehow they got Hillary into the program. Scary stuff what they were doing.
Yeah.
And the scary stuff is after that program in Montreal and the congressional investigation in the USA by Congress, the whole thing disappeared off the face of the earth. We didn't get these glimmers after that. We know that big Seattle Anti-World Trade Organization protest by the labor unions. And my ex-wife was a member of the Culinary Workers Union in San Francisco. She was up there. She said, a bunch of these crazy guys from Canada wearing masks. There were these small, short guys, and then the big, tall guys came throwing rocks at us, hurling rocks at us like crazy guys. And while the tall guys watch. And I told her back then, those are some of the MK Ultra patients. And the tall guys are the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, keeping an eye on them.
That's just unbelievable. And it's funny that you bring up her sister.
In the late 80s. So the program cranked on, but they found, instead of just murdering people, probably this Black Lives Matter thing also. You had all these very weird people coming in and starting a lot of trouble, violence.
Oh, yeah.
Where most of the protesters were they're just laid back hippies,
Yeah.
So I think that was another MK operation too, especially when the rioting was going on. It was 4 days of rioting or something, burned up properties, killed a bunch of people.
Oh, there was no question that was a Fed operation. I mean, when I observed it, it had all of the aspects.
The thing is, you look at Portland, Oregon, and you look at Minneapolis, close to the Canadian border, close to the Canadian border for these operatives to come down.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah, it was just amazing. The police just couldn't arrest these people. They just couldn't make it happen. But then January 6th, they're suddenly able to identify every single person who attended. And so you really understood that the government was involved, because when they want to capture people, they certainly do. And when they don't, they certainly don't. And it's interesting you bring up her sister Maya, because very recently I was able to determine how strange it is that her daughter, which is a young woman named Mina Harris, has no father. And what I mean by that, and we just keep seeing this happen, is that she had a child allegedly when she was a teenager, and there's no father on the birth certificate, and nobody knows who the father is. And we have been kind of obsessed with on this podcast with this recent recognition that it appears as though they're breeding politicians. They all have this very shady background. Everything you're speaking about reminds me of the Emmanuel Macron upbringing and his story and all of the strange aspects. And he's married to a person who lived as a man for 30 years. And the entire state is colluding to gaslight the public on this fact, despite all of the evidence to the contrary, all of the evidence pointing to the fact that Emmanuel Macron is married to a man who at best committed statutory rape against him when he was a teenager. And so we're seeing this program sort of writ large across society, and it's difficult to communicate to people who are still asleep and who still hold this faith that this process that's happening is above board and democratic, and that we're truly a republic, and not that there is sort of this hand that is maneuvering behind the scenes to elect certain politicians to essentially fulfill their sadistic aims.
You're absolutely right. It's Franken politics is what it is. We've got a bunch of brain dead maniacs taking orders, and you wonder what they did to Joe Biden. He's so dependent on his teleprompter and that whatever the wire they've got inside of him, that they seem to be able to take all sorts of people under. As far as Maya's kid, it's Willie Brown's a pretty tough guy, man. So it could be, Daddy Willie.
Wow.
Willie lives alone in this 20-story apartment in San Francisco. And he likes to pick the fruit. Like I said, he likes to pick the containers. The next successful black female political hero out of San Francisco, Willie Brown's got to put the tap on her.
Wow. My goodness.
Surprise if it's good old Uncle Willie. Yeah?
I do want to also ask you, by the way, since we're talking about Kamala and her relationships and this kind of open secret that, I mean, there really is no other way to say it, but she slept her way to her position of power. It was handed power. This was not a meritocracy in San Francisco. This was whether you were in with the mafia or out with the mafia. But you had mentioned in your piece that Kamala was previously married, and that is rather explosive. And you said that she was married to a Canadian Brit and that you remember seeing the marriage vividly.
About 10 years ago, I saw the article. I always know that if I see Kamala in the news, I always take note of it. But I was just reading it on an airplane or something. So I couldn't steal the magazine. And I read, she was married to a Canadian Brit guy, happily married and living in Montreal, and he had some business in Toronto also.
Okay.
Apparently their house was in Montreal. That's all I remember of the thing. It was just something I read and I just had curiosity about. And I really regret I didn't tear the page out and stuff in my shirt. I should have done it. Yeah, sometimes I'm just too honest.
So it must have been a very quick marriage, because then she very quickly thereafter married Doug Emhoff.
Yeah, that's what that struck me. And then Emhoff's got daughters, and the wife is still good and friends of Kamala. And like I say, because of the Jewish, he's in so-called in film production, okay, financing film production, but he doesn't have a list of films anywhere, okay? His name's not on any billboard. So the question is that just a cover? Was that, San Francisco again? Was that cover?
Yes. Well, someone did tell me something off record about their relationship.
If, in fact, she was still married, and maybe still married to that Canadian businessman, she's probably a Canadian and a British citizen herself, which would make her ineligible to run for nation's highest office. We don't allow Brits to sit in the Oval Office, basically, not since they burned down the White House.
Well, we also don't allow Kenyans, but that's taken place in the past before. It really is just incredible. Well, I'm going to continue to see if we can find a trace of this. As I said, someone
the secret life of Kamala Harris. It's just fascinating, but it's also horrifying, because I'm not disgusted or hate her or anything. It's just, she is just one of the last great products of MK Ultra. I mean, so that's my interest. It's clinical. The
economy has been a major burden on the average American. Wages are flat, expenses are up, and it is very hard to manage to pay all of the bills without using credit cards. If you're a homeowner and you're frustrated with that cycle, I need you to make a 10-minute no-obligation call today to my friends at American Financing. Interest rates are coming down and they are now in the low fives. If you're constantly carrying a credit card balance each and every month with a rate in the 20s, American Financing can show you how to put your hard-earned equity to work and get you out of debt. Their salary-based mortgage consultants are saving their customers an average of $800 a month. And if you get started today, you may not even have to make next month's mortgage payment. So call today at 800-795-1210. Again, that's 800-795-1210. Or you can visit americanfinancing.net/Owens. Again, that's americanfinancing.net/Owens. And it's funny that you say, because realizing how effective the MK Ultra program has been in creating various mass psychoses, and truly you can see how the media is able to just say something and therefore it is true, and people get into line and it modifies everyone's behavior, to have a woman who never, ever made a claim that she was Black all throughout her career, and said she was an Indian, and then suddenly she doesn't even win. They just assert that this is the woman who's going to be the front runner for the Democratic Party. And within 2 weeks, they're suddenly doing interviews and she's speaking about her Black upbringing and drops a book to that effect. And to see the public or at least a too large a portion of the public readily accept that is terrifying. There's an element of it that is terrifying, that people do not ordain to think for themselves or to question that narrative. It really shows you really the success of Sigmund Freud, and perhaps why they do celebrate him in the textbooks is because he, for the elites, represents their their ability to recognize that it is possible. It is possible to easily persuade the masses with enough insistence about virtually anything. And if we're being convinced about Kamala Harris and her Black heritage and the struggle that she purports that she lived through when she was a child, then we're ready to be convinced about anything, I would say.
Yeah. And there's the other weird coincidence is that her running mate, who is like the unlikely running mate, Tim Walz, he's governor of Minnesota, right there on the Canadian border, and he was involved in counterfeit smuggling of trainloads of money from China. He's been in China 30 times, and if oddly, I never saw him there. I was in East Asia for 25 years, often went to Beijing, different towns in China, Guangzhou, Beijing, all over the place. And I would have seen him sometimes. I never saw him, and I did a recent story just issued, I said recently, about counterfeit, how the counterfeit dollar business went from Britain. Britain shut it down because of the EU business, all the other Western EU, the EU currency. They created a common currency basically to stop the counterfeiting out of Britain and Holland, and the Netherlands. Okay, so I talked to a top artist there, Rembrandt. His name was. He's a direct descendant of the Rembrandt regime, the great world's greatest painter, basically. Interesting fellow. And after my call, they threw him in jail. But he told me all about the counterfeit trail from the Netherlands, mafia. He said, we have the world's best engravers. The British have the best inks and paper. We have the best engravers, from that Renaissance era. And then the money goes from the Netherlands to Indonesia, Jakarta. And I went there, and they said, yeah, it's the local military government purchased all these Boeing airliners from this very corrupt representative who used to be the U.S. ambassador to Thailand, pedophile, basically. And from there, the airliners take it to points in Asia, and where it then crosses over to the USA. But U.S. is pretty tough on counterfeit. They get detected, so it goes to Canada. They told me this. This is in Indonesia.
Wow.
So this is all part of Waltz's thing. And he's another bizarre figure, too. His father was a psycho, because he was in the Korean War and had all these nightmares, beat his kid, beat his wife. So Tim was traumatized and found his shelter, his home, his altar parentage was he felt that the Chinese Communist Party is my dad, is my mother, this is how he thought. And so he's been a long-term agent. And 25 years, I never saw him at any of the hangouts or anything like that, or on the train or plane or anything. And I said, that's really, really odd. He must be at one of the party camps. He must be. So that's the counterfeit, the whole counterfeit. Because I'm very aware of it, because I live down near the Mexican border, and I've had money seized here. Everyone here along the border has usually $20 bills and 50s. They don't even check the ones. But the 20s and 50s, everyone has had money confiscated. There's so much counterfeit down here. And this is from the Tim Walz Chinese network, undermining the U.S. currency. So
this is unbelievable.
It's also in league with the cartel. They're all allied with the cartel. And that's why Donald Trump, he shut down the Chinese consulate in Houston. So this whole southwest area is flooded with counterfeit, and it's really because when the bank, you go to a bank like Wells Fargo, you say, here's a pack of 20s. I want to deposit this in my account. I got some bills to pay. Tell her we'll run it through a machine, and then she will, without saying a word, go to the back room, come back out, and say, well, your deposit is $180. I said, I gave you $200. She says, you gave me $180 of real money.
Wow.
That's how it goes down. This is widespread down here. There's not a family here who hasn't lost money because of counterfeit.
That's just incredible. Yeah, that is really incredible. And it's Like I said, fascinating because it's almost the only thing that makes sense when you speak about Kamala Harris and all of these odd aspects of her behavior, of the things that she seems to be hiding about her family lineage. I mean, how much of a psychopath do you have to be to know that you descend from the very people who enslaved Black Americans, enslaved Black Africans, pardon me, in Jamaica? And by the way, brutal. Hamilton Brown was absolutely brutal, really fought for the right to whip them and to be able to abuse them, then intimately involved themselves when the slave trade ended, involved themselves into every layer of government. Then her family was involved in oil, Standard Oil down in Cuba. And these are all of the things that once you start looking, you see it's apparent. But to think that this woman can get up there and lie and feel nothing, as she then just takes on the character of somebody who is a descendant of slavery, should alarm everyone. It should alarm every single person to know that she lies and feels nothing. Really, to me, only a person who has been through some level of brainwashing it would be capable of doing this.
See, this is all possible because you got to understand the relationship to Near Eastern Jews, the Sassoon family, who ran the opium trade in China, turned China into the sick man of Asia. Nearly every Chinese was addicted. Remember that in the late 19th century? And so you have that Near Eastern Jewish element combined with this Chinese financing of her campaign. Okay. And Shanghai, right? I'm very familiar with Shanghai, and unfortunately, I have very, very good media friends in China. In fact, one of them died recently, who told me, the Shanghai Party Committee, the most powerful group in China, they're not full Chinese. They're descendants of Chinese Jews, of the opium, of the Sassoon's opium business. Okay? So if you got to understand that Chinese, Middle East Jewish connection to control the world's money and also to control the world's drugs. That's how you control the money. That's what the Harris-Walz campaign is all about. Those are the people behind it.
Wow. Well, I can tell you that this conversation...
This is not some small crime network. This is about global power. And what they're running now is that the United States is the sick man of the Americas.
Yeah, we are.
To hell, just what they did to China to break Chinese power. It was a powerful empire, very wealthy.
That is my fear, is that if she gets into power, it is game over, lights off for America. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show and to speak about this today. Obviously, you've given us so much information, and it's going to send us down a million more rabbit holes. It gives me the confidence to know that the stuff that we have uncovered thus far is alarming, and that there are, like I said, Americans of every single race and background are realizing that there is something that very wrong with the Kamala Harris campaign, of every religion is recognizing that there is something very wrong with the Kamala campaign. And it has been really a collaborative effort of everyone sending me information and tidbits and saying, hey, I remember this about her. Like I said, even her own family, who does not support this communist endeavor, is raising alarms here and red flags and telling me things that she is saying that are just not true about their family. And so I hope for the people that are listening to this that it further illuminates you. If you are listening to this, please share this. We obviously are already heading to the polls, and it's just important that we can notify as many people about Tim Walz, about Kamala Harris, about her true genealogy, about her true political aims, and about her true upbringing as humanly possible. I do, Yoichi Clark, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your bravery. I appreciate your willingness to be condemned by the media, which you most certainly will be alongside me. But I believe that it's going to take independent warriors for truth in order for everyone in the world to be awakened to what sorts of evil we are fighting, which I believe is just a small group of elite people who have amassed a lot of control through the media and through these sort of psychiatric programs of brainwash. So Yoichi Clark, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, guys. Well, that is a lot to digest. So many things that I was not even aware of myself. So many more things that I now want to learn about, to make sure that I am up to date on a lot of the history that has just been blatantly obscured from us all. Like I said, it is so important that we share these videos. If you are watching this right now, please hit the like and the subscribe button on YouTube. Hopefully we'll be able to hear from Yoichi Clark in the future. As I said, we want to get as much information out as possible before we head to the polls. Thanks for joining us. We will see you guys tomorrow.